0. So here we have f of x is equal to 9x squared minus 64. I'm going to take the f of x out. So f of x is just a fancy way of writing y equals, and I'm going to replace that with 0. So 0 equals 9x squared minus 64. Then all the quadratics that we are going to be solving are going to either have two terms like this one, or example 2 down here, they could have 3 terms. And depending on the amount of terms is going to determine what type of factoring that we are going to do. So looking at part A here, I've got a 9x squared minus 64. If I have 2 terms, I have 2 different ways that I could factor it. One way would be taking out a GCF. So I would look, is there a common x between the 2 terms? Or is there a common number that both of those numbers can be divided by? And 9 and 64, 9 is odd, 64 is even. They don't have a common factor. And then x squared is in the first term, but there is no x in the second term. So there is no common factor of x that I could factor out. That leaves me then with a difference of squares as my second option. So difference of squares happens if I can square root my terms. So I look at 9. What would I get when I square root 9? I would get 3. So that's a square rootable number. And then 64, what do I get when I square root 64? I would get 8. Then my difference of squares are going to factor into 2 binomials. So 9x squared, when I square root that, that's going to become 3x. 64, when I square root that, that's going to become 8. And then these difference of squares are always going to factor into 3x plus 8. So 3x plus your number that you're dealing with, or one of your binomials will be adding, and then 3x minus 8 will be your other binomial, and that's all equal to 0. So there would be my 2 binomials that are the result of factoring 9x squared minus 64. So when you're looking to factor, you're first checking out how many terms does my quadratic have, and then that's going to determine how I factor it. So here are 2 terms. It's a difference of squares. It's going to factor into those 2 binomials. Now using the zero product property. So I'm going to check to see, I want my whole equation to equal 0. I'm going to check to see what makes 3x plus 8 equal to 0. So I'm going to set 3x plus 8 equal to 0. And then what makes 3x minus 8 equal 0? So I'm going to take each of my terms and set it equal to 0. And then I would solve it out. Now here we would just subtract 8 over, then divide by 3. So I'd get x equals negative 8 thirds. On this one, I would add the 8 over, then divide by 3. I would get x equals 8 thirds. So from there, that goes back to algebra that you've been doing since pre-algebra. So we would just get our x solved out. And in either case, we're going to get to negative 8 thirds and 8 thirds. And then in a second here, we'll head to Delta Math, show you how to enter in those 2 answers onto Delta Math if you need to. So there would be our first problem, solving our quadratic by factoring. So now we'll head into part B. So part B, again, we'll start by taking and setting it equal to 0. So we'll have 0 equals x squared minus 5x. Now in this particular problem, I do still have 2 terms like I did above. But here I have an x squared and I have an x. So they both have a common x. So I'm going to factor out an x. So I'm going to divide each of these terms by x. Divide each of these terms by x, and I'm going to take that GCF and put that out in front of my parentheses. So I'm going to get 0 equals x times x minus 5. Now, if I would distribute that back out, that would end up being x squared minus 5x, but now I've separated out that x, factored that out, and now I've got 0 equals x times x minus 5. To finish the problem then, use the zero product property. We'd have x equals 0, and then x minus 5 equals 0. And we'd be left with one of our solutions is x equals 0. This one, you'd have 5 minus 5 equals 0. So our other solution is x equals 5. So there would be my two solutions for that particular problem. So in both instances, we were checking out how many terms it had. If I get that difference of squares, you're going to see numbers like 1, 4, 9, 16. Numbers that square root are going to trigger that that's a difference of squares. Part B, we had to factor out a GCF. Once we get that GCF factored out, we can use the zero product property, and we can start to find our solutions. So there's our first two problems, getting a taste of two different types of factoring to solve it out. Now we'll head into example 2. We're going to find the solutions, again, also known as zeros and x-intercepts. Whenever we need to solve a quadratic, we're always first going to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite it up here. It's going to be x squared. I'm going to add 3x over to the other side. So my equal sign is right here. Add the 3x over, minus the 28. Set that equal to 0. Now I check out my polynomial or my quadratic again. I look, I've got an x squared plus 3x minus 28. That's going to have 3 terms. Anytime I have 3 terms, that's automatically going to mean I have factoring going into 2 binomials. So I'm going to factor this out. Then the nice thing about this one is I do have an a term of 1, and everything on Delta Math will have a terms of 1 so that we can factor them out pretty quickly. So I'm looking at a number riddle. How could I multiply to negative 28? And add to 3. So does anybody have 2 numbers that they can think of? So it's kind of like a riddle. Numbers that multiply to negative 28, and then the same 2 numbers, when you add them, they'll add to 3. So one's going to have to be positive, one's going to have to be negative. So what 2 numbers are 3 apart that would multiply to negative 28, or just to 28, think? Boom, Isaac's got it, 7 and 4. And then the 7 would have to be positive so that when you add them, 7 would have to be positive so that when you add 7 and negative 4, they're going to still add to positive 3. So there's now my factoring. Now I would set each of these equal to 0. X plus 7 is going to equal 0. X minus 4 is going to equal to 0. And I get my 2 solutions. X is going to equal negative 7. X is going to equal positive 4. There's going to be my 2 solutions. So everything checks out. We get our 7 and negative 4 will add up to 3. We set each of those terms equal to 0. We get our 2 solutions. So that's a good check, is when you're solving these, you're always going to get 2 solutions. Once you get those 2 solutions, I'm going to head into Delta Math right now, show you how to find your, how to put in your answers. So we'll head into our student page. Here's an example of one. I've got an x squared plus 6x equals 0. So you look at that. How many terms does x squared plus 6x have? It has 2 terms. And I look, I've got an x that's in common in both. So I'm going to factor out that x. So x comes out. I'm still going to have x plus 6 in parentheses equals 0. So when I'm factoring out that x, I'm kind of doing the reverse of the distributive property. So that x is going to come out in front. It's divided out of each of those terms, and now it's going out front as a multiplication. From there, I'm going to have 2 terms. X is equal to 0, or x plus 6 is equal to 0. There's my 2 answers. So I'd have x is 0, or x is negative 6. There's going to be my 2 solutions. To put in your answers, you're going to hit 0 for your first solution, and then you hit a comma. It's going to open up a second box. You can put in your negative 6 into the second box. So there's going to be an example of what your Delta Math problems will look like. You might have this one. You might not have it. If you have this one, you can go ahead and use those 2 answers. But you get 0 and negative 6. Once you've got those, hit submit. And it'll also go through and show you how to solve it as well. Even if you get the problem right, check it out. You might learn some tips and tricks, might learn a few things. Check out how to solve that one out. So that is going to conclude. Just a couple announcements here before we go. We are getting close to the end of the semester, so let's finish the semester strong. Remember that your semester grades are final, and if you're not passing at the end of the semester, then you will have to retake Algebra 2A, or at least you'll have to retake the first semester. So when you're looking at Infinite Campus, you're looking at your semester grade. So your semester grade is what determines if you are passing at the semester or not your quarter grade, it's your semester grade. Then also we will be doing a semester change. So be checking your email if teachers are trying to reach out to you for your second semester classes, especially classes like careers and things that are just semester classes. You'll for sure be changing into those at semester time. That is all I have then. If you want to stick around to work, or else you can break off on your own. Tomorrow we'll finish up day 2 of lesson 35, and then we'll start getting into review on Thursday. So if I don't see you, have a great rest of your day, and we will see you again tomorrow morning. Stick around if you want to continue working on lesson 35. Thank you. See you later.